I'm actually a secret introvert and I get really bad social anxiety. I don't like networking events. I walk into networking events and sometimes beeline to the bathroom and try to
Welcome to the Raw and Real podcast. Are you dreaming of changing your life through opening a business, or are you curious what obstacles entrepreneurs had to overcome on their journey? Then you're in the right place. My name is Agnes Pillik and I'm your host. Hey, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It would really mean a lot to me if you would join my Facebook group Raw and Real Talks, that I can get to know you better and interact more with you on a personal level. So I hope to see you there. Are you currently looking for a more fulfilling job? You want to start your own business, blog, YouTube channel, or just get your portfolio out there? It all starts with creating your own website and choosing the right hosting provider. Hosting is kind of like the home for your website and the whole infrastructure behind it. And with Bluehost, you get a free domain for the first year. You can install WordPress with just one click, which means that it's super easy. You don't need to write any code. You can create anything you want with customizable templates. So get started now and click on the link in the description below. So just again, click on the link in the description below and get started now. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Raw and Real. Today's guest on the show is Stacy Taubman. She's the founder of Rise Collaborative Workspace, the first female-focused co-working space that offers support, community, and mentorship for businesswomen and teenage girls. If you want to find out how to go from high school teacher without having any business knowledge in your mid-30s to entrepreneur and building your own company, then this episode is for you. I'm very curious about your personal story, as you have quite an unusual background before diving into entrepreneurship. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I look back 8 years ago and I would never have predicted that I would be here today. So it is quite a wild ride. I was actually a high school math teacher. So I'm a big math nerd. I don't know if there's any math nerds out there, but I taught math for 12 years, and I don't know about you, but I was that kid that didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I can vividly remember sitting in college in a math class and thinking, I either want to be a CEO of some company or a principal by the time I'm 28. And I look back and I chuckle a little bit because I didn't even know that CEO stood for Chief Executive Officer, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just know CEO meant boss, which apparently was important to me at a young age, which is kind of comical. So I pursued education and tried to become a principal by the time I was 28. And at 24, I interned in the principal's office. And keep in mind, high schoolers in St. Louis, in the United States, they're 17, 18 years old coming to the principal's office, and I'm 24. It was a interesting experience, and teachers were double my age. And here I thought I should be this principal and tell them, how to be a great teacher when I barely knew how to be a great teacher myself. So, that was obviously not a great fit for me. So I went on and got my master's in school counseling. Because I thought, I want to be the good guy. I want to talk about life with students and help them figure out who they are and what they want to be when they grow up, versus as a principal, you're giving the detention. I mean, that's not all that a principal does, but giving detentions and disciplining. So I got another master's and that one took me till I was 33.
That's a while.
Yeah, that's a while. So 2 masters. I actually have 2 undergraduate degrees. So at 33, I interned as a counselor. We all know where this is going because here we are on this lovely podcast. That wasn't the right fit for me either. School counseling is great, but it wasn't what I expected. And so at 33, I was really floundering to figure out what is my life going to look like.
What was the thing that was different that you expected?
Yeah. So, what I envision school counseling is talking to these young people and really, like I said, helping them to figure out who they are and what they want for life. And not that never happens, but the bulk of it, the time, at least it was back in 2012, was spending time with scheduling and credit checking and, state testing and more administrative and box checking than people, if that makes sense. And I wanted to connect with people and help change lives. I went into education because of all the education movies that you watch where you get to hear about the teachers changing, their students' lives.
And what was it like for you? Because I can imagine, I mean, you were at that time 33, you spent a really long time of your life in education, and then you're
Yeah.
standing there and you should have found your path already, kind of, and know
Yeah.
what you want to do. And then you just don't, and you find out, oh, that's not the right path for me either. And I think that can be also really challenging, also when you look at your surrounding and everyone, already kind of found
Yeah.
their path, maybe getting kids and settling down.
Exactly. Totally. There's this pressure, at least in the States. I can't speak for, outside of the United States, but there's this pressure, college, career, family, all the things. And I wasn't doing any of those things. At 33, I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. Um, I was in a profession that I didn't hate, but I didn't love. I didn't feel like I had found my thing. So I was really floundering. I mean, I was really floundering at 33. And I think life has a funny way of sending you loud messages. I don't always think that they're fun messages. I think sometimes they can be really hard. And the key is to listen, right? Back in 2012, July 4th of 2012, a young woman at my school died by suicide. She hung herself at her best friend's party, and that was incredibly jarring. And all of her friends were in my class, and I knew her family. And for me, that was a real tipping point when I look back. I don't think I realized it in that moment, right? Oftentimes, tipping points you don't know in that moment. But when you look back, you're like, that definitely played a big role for me. For me, it was like enough's enough. High school sucks for a lot of kids, not everyone. And I want to change that. And so far, I haven't found a job that works for me. So I'm just going to have to create it myself.
So what happened then? What were the steps that you took? Because I mean, I can imagine that it's quite scary then
Yeah.
to find your own job, like
Oh,
define
yeah.
it, make it.
Right. And just for some context, I grew up with a family who are very risk adverse. My mom was a secretary and a teacher. My father worked middle management in corporate America, never climbed the corporate ladder, just wanted the steady Eddie job. So I wasn't around people who lived in that way. So I didn't have a lot of role models like that. But at the end, so July 4th was a suicide. At the end of July, I met a young man who started a company when he was 26. And at 31, his company had 40 million in revenue.
Wow, that's
And yeah, I would say fairly successful. And I had never met anyone like that. I thought those people were so different from me, right? I thought those people had to be so much smarter, so much more charismatic. I don't know. I just thought they would be very different than who I was as a human. And when I got to know him and realized, like, wait a minute, he's no smarter than me. Like I'm maybe even smarter than him, like, and I don't mean that like an obnoxious way, but like, yeah, he's no smarter than me and he's not that different from me. So that awareness and exposure really changed me on this course. And is like, if he can do it, I can do it. That crazy confidence that somehow I had. And so you asked about the path. I didn't have a clear path. I just started, he told me about a woman named Marie Forleo, who's really impressive, is an online kind of person. She has a great show called Marie TV. So I started listening to her, like all the online gurus, right? Like I thought I was going to maybe start a blog. So I took a course, like how to start a blog. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just throwing spaghetti at the wall and doing a lot of learning and growing. There was a great book called $100 Startup by Chris, and I will not even attempt to say his last name, but I could spell it for somebody. His book, $100 Startup, was really helpful for me.
What was so helpful for you? What kind of particular message?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, think about my context and my knowledge. Mom, secretary, teacher, dad, middle management. This idea of starting a company, I thought you needed like millions of dollars to do, right? And I had none of that. I didn't have a dime to my name. I was a teacher. And so to read this book that talked about how you could start a business for as little as $100, and just talking about some of the creative ways to get started without having to have all this money. Now, ultimately, I didn't use a lot of those. I ended up having to spend some money, but not nearly the amount I would have thought it took to start a business. I think back in 2012, there was a little bit of a misnomer, at least in the circles I ran in, that if you want to start a business, you have to have a lot of money. And I did not have that. And so that book helped me to sort of understand that that was possible.
So you don't have a business background at all. You didn't have anything to do with business. So you started educating yourself a little bit online with podcasts, with books. And what happened then?
Great question. And I watched several TED Talks. It was right when TED Talks was kind of becoming popular. And Sheryl Sandberg did her now infamous TED Talk, all about her lean in philosophy. And look, do I know that that philosophy is flawed? Absolutely. But at that time in 2012, when I found her podcast, it was starting a conversation that we weren't having, or at least I didn't feel like we were having. So Sheryl Sandberg's TED Talk was really instrumental to me. This idea of leaning in, going after your dreams, women going to, craving, climbing to the top. And so after watching that TED Talk and talking to these high school girls and hearing about their struggles in January 2013, while teaching full time, I started a company called Girls Dreaming Big. And it was a tutoring and coaching company for high school girls. And what I would do is I'd stand up and teach math, quadratic formula, what have you. And then I'd sit down and I'd be surrounded by what now I know is called my target market. But at the time, I wouldn't have had that business terminology. And I would ask them, what do you need? What can I create? How can I help you to dream and achieve big? And it's funny, I think about myself, what helped me to dream and achieve big, and it's travel, getting outside the United States, right? Getting to see all the cool places around the world. And so the first dollar I ever made for Girls Dreaming Big was taken overseas to Bali for a trip, service, sightseeing, and nightly seminars. So it was a lot of just trial and error. Like, what grand idea do I have? And let's try it and see how it goes. I had the luxury of being a beginner and being clueless. Like, being clueless can be challenging, but it's also that blissful naive and that blissful ignorance where you have no freaking clue how hard it is. And so you're like, I can totally do it. That has power.
And how did you end up in the end really taking the leap and building a co-working space, especially for women?
Right? That's why I talk about, you have to be really clear about your why, but you have to be flexible about your how and your what, right? Because if I had been unflexible about my how and my what, I would have still been doing this tutoring coaching company. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I get to change so many more lives because I was flexible. So when I started that tutoring coaching company, I thought, okay, I know how to help girls if they want to be a math teacher, but what if they want to be anything else in the world? Lawyer, doctor, whatever. How the heck am I going to help them on that path? And so I started interviewing smart, strong, successful women and saying, I'd love to have coffee with you. Will you share your story with me? I want to help these young women and I need to understand what you did to be successful. So that first year, I actually interviewed 300 women. And I now know I did a lot of qualitative market research without even setting out to do that.
So what were the commonalities that you saw among these 300 women?
Yeah. And people are like, did you drink 300 coffees? And I was like, no, I limited it, one coffee a day. No, so it was interesting to talk to these women while they came from every background you can imagine. The commonalities were they wanted to give back to the next generation. They cared about that just as much as I did about making that path for women easier. They really were craving the opportunity to connect with like-minded women. And when I say like-minded, I don't necessarily mean similar industry or similar age or ethnic or race background. Like, I don't mean like-minded in that way. I mean women who are ambitious, women who are striving, women who are collaborative and positive and warm, like all of those things is sometimes hard to come by. I know you and I at one point were talking about that,
Yeah.
And then lastly, I found out that a lot of women are doing business in coffee shops, even women, corporate America women. There were CEOs of large companies in St. Louis, the city I'm from, that were having these business development meetings in local coffee shops. So there's a lot of business being done in coffee shops. But you know what? Coffee shops get really old really fast. There's little nuances to them. Like, and this is going to sound silly if you've never worked from a coffee shop, but if you have, you'll get it. Like, who watches your laptop when you go to the bathroom? Do you weirdly take your laptop into the bathroom with you? Or you ask the stranger next to you that, Or like you have this important meeting that you're really excited about, but you can't find a seat. Or you find a seat and there's screaming babies and children all around you, or the coffee grinder, right? Like coffee shops are really helpful in some ways and a little challenging. And back in 2012, 2013 in St. Louis, we definitely had co-working. Co-working was already existing. But when I went to them in St. Louis, they were very tech driven, right? So they were developed a lot because of tech, right? So tech tends to attract young men. The co-working spaces I were in, had the kegerators and the ping pong tables and the foosballs, and there's nothing wrong with those things. But for me at that point in my mid 30s and liking a little bit of luxury and, like I didn't want the ping pong tables and the kegerators and, like that's not a great environment for high school girls. And so there wasn't a co-working space or a coffee shop that really met my needs or the needs of all these amazing women I was interviewing. So I was like, well, this doesn't exist, what I need. So I'm just going to have to create it.
What were then the moments that you were like really doubting yourself? Because I can imagine, it's a big project.
Yeah.
And starting something like that can be very scary.
Yeah. It can be. And I definitely had them. And I'll share two with you. But again, I think that blissful naive really served me well. And I'll give you an example of that. In 2015, I had a company launch party. I got 23 sponsors. I had on this beautiful apartment complex on a rooftop deck, this gorgeous place, because again, we're like the Nordstroms of co-working, right? So we're this approachable luxury brand. So I thought, I'm going to launch my company. I need to have this beautiful place to send the message of who we are. I invited some of the most impressive women of St. Louis. I had these fabulous speakers. I decked it out. And again, 20 some odd sponsors, right? So it was amazing. I stood up in front of all these women and said, opening early 2016. And I really meant it. I thought I was so naive to think that I could have a company launch party September 2015, finish raising all the capital I had to raise, find the space, build out the space, and do everything I needed to do, and somehow open up January 2016. And people who were in the industry would look at me and be like, I'm sorry, what? And they would tell me I was wrong. And I was like, you just don't know me, right? Like I just thought that I knew what I was doing. And when it didn't happen in 2016, and it took me quite a bit longer, we didn't open our doors till January 2017. So I was off by a full year. And throughout that year, 2016 to 2017, I had a lot of doubt. And I was embarrassed that I stood up and made this big to-do. And I didn't pull that off, And so when you have that public announcement and you're not doing it, there's some moments where like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Should I just quit? But it actually worked to my favor. And so I'm thankful for that. The second time I had a massive doubt, and this is getting in the weeds a little bit, so you'll have to tell me, but your listeners are in the startup world, I had to raise capital. I didn't have a dime to my name. And back in 2015, 16, 17 in St. Louis, the startup community was still sort of blooming. And the people who were advising me said I should raise money through equity. So I was advised by a lawyer to get something called a PPM. This is where I'm probably getting in the weeds. But a PPM is a legal document that protects you, right? It's a very expensive legal document. It takes a long time to do. I had raised money through Indiegogo. So I used $10,000 of that money that I had raised towards this big legal document to save myself in case something went south. 12 days after I finished it, I met with Maxine Clark, the founder of Build-A-Bear. And she said, how are you raising money? I said, equity. She said, what's your valuation? I said, 2.5. And she laughed in my face, 2.5 million. And she laughed in my face, as she should have. But I had no idea. My company valuation was based on what was written down on paper, not the reality. And nobody was going to believe that I could raise, that my company was worth 2.5 million. She's like, yeah, no, that's not going to work for you. So 12 days after I paid that $10,000 bill, I realized that document was a big old waste of money. And there was no way I was going to pull it off doing it that way. And I better find a way to raise money other than just through equity.
Wow. So you threw just like the $10,000 out of the window.
I just basically lit that money on fire. So I still have that binder, but that became very irrelevant to what I was doing. And it's not that the lawyer was wrong. It was just wrong for me, right? Like I was talking to somebody who is used to working with clients in a different phase. I needed a lawyer, which I found one, who better understood my phase of the business. And so I quickly instead raised money through a convertible note.
Mm.
So we don't have to get in the weeds of all that, but just I had to completely find a different mechanism to raise capital. And no longer did I need that $10,000 legal document.
And when you finally started, what were your biggest struggles?
Yeah. So I didn't know this about myself at the time, but I now know that I'm a born entrepreneur. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love building things. I love having ideas and making them a reality. What is hard for me is once that idea comes to life, there's a lot more you need to do. It's not just about the idea, it's about the execution thereafter. And the execution side of things is where I continue to learn and grow. And if I'm being frankly honest, like at times I get bored with the execution. I want to move on to my next big idea, right? And slowing down and sitting in that space and doing well and not chasing the shiny object was a learning opportunity for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and then frankly, the people side of business, hiring staff. I was a high school math teacher. I've never worked in corporate America. I have no understanding. I had no understanding of like corporate structure and how you build out a team and how you hire and any of that. So I made a lot of mistakes, and learning how to manage and build a team has been the hardest thing for me.
Was there a particular lesson that really helped you to become a better leader and manager?
Couple things. So early on, I tried to change who I was to meet the needs of my staff. And that was really confusing for me. Like I am a very driven type A, like I hold myself to a high standard. I mean what I say what I mean. And I didn't understand that a lot of my team was women. And I didn't understand that women are not as used to at times having a boss that means what she, says what she means. I mean, a lot of times they're looking for subcontext and all this stuff. And that was confusing to me. And I got really great advice that was like, Stacy, you don't have to change who you are. You just have to shepherd your impact. You have to do a better job of helping people to understand what's going on. So for example, like sometimes when I'm stressed, I get into execution mode. Like, let's get this done and get this done and get this done, like really intense, right? That shift in my energy can be confusing for people because they're used to like friendly and bubbly, right? And then I'm like, let's get this done. And the story they tell themselves is that I'm mad at them, is what I learned. Mm-hmm. And as the boss, all they want to do is please me. And so when I shift that energy, they can feel like they're failing. And so what I have to do a better job is shepherding my impact and saying, okay, guys, I'm a little stressed. We got a lot to do. And so I'm a little bit intense right now. So just giving that kind of preface to my state of mind. I don't have to change that I'm in that intense mode. I don't have to change that I'm in like, let's get it done. But I do have to help them to understand that it's not that they're failing. Mm-hmm. And so that's been really, that whole shepherding my impact instead of trying to change who I am really has been helpful for me. Mm-hmm. So that's one of them.
And I think one of the things that you also really had to learn was building social capital.
Yes. I'm very passionate about that because, I was a nerdy math person, right? And so when I in my 20s, I've always wanted to be successful. I've always wanted to like, either be CEO or be a principal, whatever. And you would hear people give you that advice. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And I hated that advice. I found that incredibly intimidating. Look, what I knew was the most important thing about my job, math, right? Like if I don't know math, I'm not going to execute my job very well, right? Yeah. And the only people I knew were math teachers and students and their parents.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, that's probably not the best. If that advice is really true, how the heck am I going to do that? And while it's very unbelievable on this podcast, I'm actually a secret introvert and I get really bad social anxiety. I don't like networking events. I walk into networking events and sometimes beeline to the bathroom and try to like work up the courage to get back out there and be like, how the heck I've literally called my best friend from a bathroom in a networking event being like, okay, how do I do this? What am I supposed to do? Because I was so intimidated by networking events. But what I found is by having those one-on-one coffees, which really honored who I was, um, helped me to build my social capital, which is a term I learned after the fact.
So how would you approach it? So you would go to a networking event. It would be really
No,
hard for you.
I did go to a couple, and then I was like, I can't do this. This is not for me. I am not acting like my best self. I'm just anxious and being awkward, and or just talking to the friend that I came with. So I believe building social capital is a lot like building wealth, real capital, right? You know, they always say you need to save money today so it's there when you need it in the future. Same thing. People need to start building social capital today so when you actually need it, it's there. Too often people wait until they're looking for a job or starting a company or whatever, and they get really desperate and grabby and transactional. You got to start building it today when it doesn't matter. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't know that I was building social capital. I just wanted to get to know these women. I just wanted to build relationships. That's the first thing. The second thing is like, just like wealth, you either, you know, some people invest in stocks or mutual funds or real estate, or you have to figure out your investing strategy that honors who you are. Like, what are your values? How risk adverse are you? Same thing with building social capital. You need to think about who am I and what feels natural to me, right? Going to these networking events obviously was not natural for me. So if I keep going to them all the time, that's not going to work. So what feels natural to me are things like this, you and I, having these one-on-one conversations. So I literally have had thousands of coffee meetings with women and men, which is very time consuming and maybe not the most efficient way to go about it. But for me, it honors who I am and it really works.
And how would you get in touch with people? Because usually at a networking event, just have like a lot of people in the room and you can just kind of see, how this person is. So did you just like check out people online and write them a message if they would be up for a coffee or?
Yeah. So it's a combination of things. And to be honest, so my business is opened in St. Louis and we expanded into Denver, Colorado. And I had never set foot into Denver, Colorado previous to February 2018. We opened our doors April 2019, and I had to do the exact same thing over. I knew no one in Denver, and I had to start reaching out and having these coffees like you're talking about. So I would do a couple things, right? One, I would leverage my network. So I would say like, hey guys, I'm going to Denver. Who do I need to meet? Or you send an email. When I first started years ago, I sent an email to like my 10 friends, 9 were teachers. I think one owned a tutoring company. And I just said like, I need to meet people who are smart, strong, successful women. Who do you recommend? And of those 10 emails, maybe one person gave me a name, right? So it's not a quick or easy process. So leveraging your network, finding out who they want you to meet. Second, leveraging LinkedIn and Instagram, just like how we connected through LinkedIn. But to your point that when we were talking the first time is that sometimes on LinkedIn, when you reach out and you're like, hi, how are you doing? I'd love to connect. Sometimes you get ignored, right?
Yeah.
It's not an immediate, right? I maybe sent out, let's say 100, hi, how are you? You look really interesting. I'd love to get to know you. And maybe 2 came from, I don't know the exact numbers, right?
Yeah,
But
it's low. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the last thing is leveraging the coffees that you're having. So what I mean by that is like a St. Louis member would introduce me to someone in Denver. I would have a meeting with that gal or guy. And I would say, I'm new to Denver. Who do I need to talk to? And then they would give me some names and I would say, would you be comfortable introducing me? Or is it okay if I use your name? Because how do you cut through the noise, right? And so if they don't want to introduce you, but they are willing to let you use their name, I'll often put their name in the subject line. So let's say somebody said, I needed to meet you, and the gal that said that was your good friend, Sally. In the subject line, I would be like, Sally Smith, right? You see the email that says Sally Smith's your great friend. You're much more likely to open that email and be like, oh, I should probably listen to this. Maybe I should entertain the idea of having coffee with this person I've never heard of or met.
Mm-hmm.
So those little small things sometimes really help.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering, so you expanded to a second city. So what were the things that, made you successful in the beginning when you started, and then later
Yeah.
on maybe hindered you in the
Yeah.
process?
Yeah. It's interesting in the world of entrepreneurship. Sometimes the things that make you successful early on, um, I talk a lot about strengths and shadows, right? Like my strength is I'm a super doer. I can get stuff done. I can, like I built out the website. I did our social media. We were able to get started with very little money because between myself and my business partner, we did it all. Right. And that's a really good quality when you're starting a business. The shadow side of that is that's not so good when you scale because that's not sustainable. You can't build a national or global company um, by just being a super doer and trying to do everything, right? You need to build in systems and processes and teammates so that you can let go of control, which is hard for me. And then I needed to learn how to multiply myself, if that makes sense. We were successful through brute force. And brute force is great in the early days, but brute force is not how you build a global company.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
got in my way sometimes.
That makes sense. And as you have to do a lot with many women, are there certain common factors that you see that make really strong women, that make really great CEOs or female entrepreneurs?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot about our core values. I was a part of an organization called Entrepreneur Organization. I was a part of their accelerator, and they really drive home like core values, core values, core values. So a year after starting my company, I really thought about our core values and what kind of women we were trying to attract. I won't tell you all of them, but some of the things that stand out with what you asked, growth minded, being really, look, I don't have to have all the answers today. I actually don't have all the answers, but I have to be willing to grow and surround myself with people way smarter than me. Um, there's a term called shine theory that I love. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on their names. Two women journalists came up with that term. It's this idea of I don't shine if you don't shine. My job as CEO, my job as running this co-working space in this community is to shine a light on all the amazing people in our community. I don't want to get to the top by myself. I want to get to the top with all my friends, and I want to help them to get there. And I think that's a really important quality in a leader. I think it's a really important quality with people around you, amplifying other people's message, shining a light on that. And I'm so sad I can't think of the woman's name who coined that term. It is not my term. But if you Google shine theory, it's really impressive. I heard the gal speak, one of the people who coined the term, at a conference. And when she was talking and describing it, I was like, oh my God, yes, 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 yes. That's exactly what I'm trying to build. So those are just the two that like jump out. I don't want to bore you with the list of like 5 more.
Okay, awesome. And do you still have a last key takeaway, a personal insight that helped you grow that you would still like to share?
Ah. So one of the quotes we live by at Rice Collaborative is you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And some of us are just blessed to have incredible people by your side, right? But some of us, like myself, don't have incredible people, and you have to go out and seek those people because the 5 people you spend the most time with really shape what you believe is possible, can help you get there, and can pick you up when you're on the floor and about to quit. And so while it takes intentionality and effort, you really need to put yourself out there and find groups of people that really are going to help you get where you're trying to go. So like for us, yes, we are a co-working space, but we're so much more than that. And we recently launched a digital platform called Rise Digital. And we plan to have members from all over the world on this platform so that women can build their social capital and be surrounded by 5+ really incredible people to help you get where you're going. And that sometimes can be intimidating and it takes effort, but it is really worth the effort and time. So I'm pumped about Rise Digital. I had 2 locations and membership close to 400 women and men because we're female focused, male friendly. And now with Rise Digital, our goal is to have 1,000 people in our community, 1,000 people from all over the world. And I get so excited when I think about women trying to dream and achieve big, and at their fingertips on this app, they have the resources, the tools, the women to help make what they're trying to do a reality. So it's been really fun.
Sounds great. And how can people get in touch with you?
Yes. From learning more about the business, go to riseworkspace.com. To learn more about me, go to LinkedIn. And my name is Stacy Taubman, and I'm sure you'll share that in the show notes or what have you. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to have virtual coffees with people. That's how you and I connected. Yeah, and I just love helping people. So reach out.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for everyone who's watching or listening. And there are so many moments in this podcast today where Stacy shares amazing tips and pieces of wisdom. So please make sure to share them on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and make sure to tag me and Stacy so we can see what really resonated with you. Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. I publish videos every week that will help you grow on your entrepreneurial journey and that will motivate you to follow through on your dreams. So make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my new videos.